Someone sends you a message that feels slightly disrespectful. You feel the urge to answer immediately, but you don't. In another conversation, you realize halfway through that you're wrong, and instead of defending your position, you change it. Someone else's success makes you jealous, but rather than feeling ashamed, you become curious about what that jealousy is trying to tell you. And when you walk into a room where the mood feels strange, you notice it without automatically assuming you caused it. None of these behaviors looks extraordinary, but psychologically they can reveal something much bigger. Emotional intelligence often appears in moments so small that other people barely notice them. It lives in the space between what you feel and what you choose to do next. If you enjoy exploring psychology, human behavior, and the patterns quietly shaping your life, subscribe. That's exactly what we explore here. High emotional intelligence doesn't mean you never get angry, always know the perfect thing to say, avoid conflict, or remain calm every second of the day. Emotionally intelligent people can feel insecure, jealous, frustrated, embarrassed, and overwhelmed just like anyone else. The difference is often what happens after the emotion arrives. You can think of it as 4 quiet abilities: noticing, interpreting, regulating, and responding. And once you know what to look for, these abilities start showing up everywhere. The first habit is surprisingly simple. Emotionally intelligent people pause before responding to emotionally charged moments. Imagine receiving criticism you weren't expecting. Your body may react before your reasoning catches up. Your chest tightens. Your mind starts preparing a defense. Maybe your first thought is, "That's unfair." That first reaction isn't the problem. It's human. But there is a difference between having an impulse and obeying it. A short pause creates enough psychological distance to ask, what am I actually reacting to? Is there something useful in what they said? Am I responding to the situation, or to the embarrassment it created? Sometimes that pause lasts 10 seconds. Sometimes it means waiting an hour before answering a message. Sometimes it's nothing more than taking one breath before speaking. From the outside, almost nothing happened. Internally, something important did. Emotion became awareness before it became behavior. And that leads to the second habit: they can name what they're actually feeling. Most people describe their emotional state with broad words. I'm stressed. I'm upset. I'm annoyed. But those words can hide very different experiences. Maybe you're not angry. Maybe you're embarrassed because you felt dismissed. Maybe you're not stressed. Maybe you're afraid of disappointing someone. Maybe what looks like irritation is actually resentment because you've agreed to something you never wanted to do. The more precisely you identify an emotion, the more precisely you can understand what it's telling you. This ability is sometimes described as emotional granularity, distinguishing between emotional states instead of experiencing them as one vague cloud of bad. And it matters because different emotions can point toward different problems. Disappointment may require acceptance. Guilt may require repair. Resentment may point toward a boundary. Anxiety may be asking you to separate a real problem from an imagined outcome. Emotionally intelligent people don't identify their feelings perfectly every time. They simply become less satisfied with the first label. Which brings us to the third habit: they get curious about their triggers. When something hits a nerve, the easiest question is often, why did they make me feel this way? But emotional intelligence introduces another question. Why did this affect me so strongly? That doesn't mean blaming yourself for someone else's behavior. If someone is disrespectful, manipulative, or cruel, their behavior still belongs to them. But your reaction can contain information about you. Maybe being interrupted feels unusually painful because you already struggle with feeling unheard. Maybe criticism from one particular person affects you more because their approval matters to you. Maybe another person's success creates jealousy because it touches a goal you've been quietly avoiding. A trigger isn't always proof that something is wrong. Sometimes it's a clue. And the more curious you become about that clue, the less likely you are to let an old emotional pattern make a new decision for you. The fourth habit is that they don't automatically confuse discomfort with danger. An awkward conversation can feel uncomfortable. So can receiving constructive criticism, admitting that you were wrong, setting a boundary, or disappointing someone you care about. Your nervous system may want relief immediately. Avoid the conversation. Change the subject. Say yes when you want to say no. Defend yourself before you've even considered what the other person said. But emotional intelligence gradually teaches you something important. Discomfort is not always a warning to escape. Sometimes discomfort is simply the price of honesty. You can feel nervous and still have the conversation. You can feel guilty and still maintain a reasonable boundary. You can feel embarrassed and still admit you made a mistake. This feels uncomfortable, and this is unsafe, are not the same statement. And learning the difference can completely change the way you handle relationships. The fifth habit is being able to validate someone without necessarily agreeing with them. During disagreements, people often act as if there are only two options. Either I agree with you or I reject what you're saying. But emotionally intelligent communication creates a third option. I understand why you experienced it that way. Notice what that sentence doesn't say. It doesn't say, you're right. It doesn't say, I'm wrong. It simply recognizes another person's emotional reality. You can understand why someone is disappointed by your decision and still believe your decision was necessary. You can recognize someone's frustration without accepting unfair accusations. You can empathize with their perspective without abandoning your own. That ability matters because many conflicts aren't really intensified by disagreement. They're intensified by the feeling of not being heard. If one of these habits is already making you think of yourself or someone you know, tell me in the comments which one. And if you're enjoying the video, leave a like. It helps more people find these conversations. The sixth habit is noticing when your ego has quietly entered the conversation. This can happen almost invisibly. You begin a disagreement because you want to solve a problem. Then something changes. Now you want the final word. You start defending a point you aren't even sure you believe anymore. You notice evidence that the other person might be right, but accepting it suddenly feels like losing. The conversation is no longer about understanding. It's about protecting your identity. Emotionally intelligent people aren't immune to this. They simply become better at noticing the transition. And one question can expose it surprisingly quickly. Am I trying to solve this or am I trying to win? If the honest answer is win, you suddenly have a choice. You can continue feeding the conflict or return to what actually matters. The seventh habit goes even deeper. They treat emotions as information, not orders. Anger might tell you that a boundary has been crossed. Jealousy might reveal something you deeply want. Anxiety might point toward uncertainty. Sadness might tell you that something meaningful has been lost. Emotions contain information. But information is not the same thing as instruction. Anger doesn't automatically mean you should send the message. Fear doesn't automatically mean you should retreat. Jealousy doesn't automatically mean someone else has done something wrong. An emotion can be completely real without being the best person to put in charge of your next decision. And this is where emotional intelligence becomes much more than simply controlling your feelings. The goal isn't to silence the emotion. It's to listen without automatically obeying. Then there is the eighth habit, and it may be the hardest one to fake. Emotionally intelligent people can update the way they see themselves. You might discover that you misunderstood someone, that you were unfair, that a behavior you thought was confidence was actually defensiveness, that something you believed you had moved past still affects you. For some people, information like this feels threatening because admitting, I handled that badly quickly becomes, I am a bad person. So they defend, deny, explain, or blame. But self-awareness without self-condemnation creates another possibility. I was wrong. What do I need to change? That sentence requires a surprisingly stable sense of self. Because growth depends on being able to receive uncomfortable information about yourself without needing to destroy yourself or reject the information. And when you look at all 8 habits together, a pattern appears. Pausing before reacting. Naming the emotion. Investigating the trigger. Tolerating discomfort. Understanding without automatically agreeing. Noticing the ego. Listening to emotions without obeying them. And changing your view of yourself when new information appears. They all come back to 4 abilities. Notice. Interpret. Regulate. Respond. High emotional intelligence doesn't necessarily mean experiencing fewer difficult emotions. It means developing a different relationship with them. So think about the last moment when something emotionally hijacked you. What did you actually feel? What story did your mind immediately create about that feeling? What did the emotion make you want to do? And if you had given yourself 10 more seconds before reacting, what might you have chosen instead? Because perhaps the most interesting thing about emotional intelligence is that the more you develop it, the less dramatic it may look from the outside. Sometimes there's no confrontation, no perfect comeback, no impressive speech. Sometimes emotional intelligence looks like a pause nobody notices, a better question, an honest admission, a boundary expressed without hostility, or a reaction you were fully capable of having, but consciously chose not to. Emotional intelligence isn't about controlling what you feel. It's about becoming more intentional about what happens after you feel it. So which of these 8 habits do you think you've developed the most, and which one are you still working on? Share your answer in the comments, and if this video gave you something useful to think about, leave a like. Then click the video appearing on your screen right now. We'll continue exploring the psychology behind the patterns quietly shaping the way you think, feel, and behave. I'll see you there.